the Braniac Project wasn't really something that had an official start. It just kind of snowballed. It was something where I'd always been mentoring people informally. I didn't know what mentoring even was. I just always liked to invite other creative people into my space. And hip hop is an art form for the youth. Just being in certain spaces would attach myself to certain people that I thought were fresh, generally that were up under me, younger than me, that I thought, you know, need an avenue or a space to create. You know, at the time I had a studio space, so I'm like, okay, well, if you don't have anywhere to record, come through. If you don't have nothing to do, come through. I really studied the native tongues era, and I just remember like most of my favorite rappers that I admired, they talk about this period of their career where they just will have like crews of people that they surrounded themselves with that were all creative, and everybody was feeding off one another, and that's how projects kind of get done. And it's funny because it's similar like that to academia. Like if you're in a research lab, you're more likely to be more productive, more work is getting produced. But that's really what the Braniac Project idea started off as. Was like, all right, bet I'm just gonna start inviting young cats to the studio to work. I was looking for beat makers. I was looking for people who could engineer. I was looking for people who had cool styles that like I just wanted to be around. Hopefully they could soak up things from me and vice versa. And that turned into, at some point, me wanting to formally and actively structure what was going on at the studio and not just have it be a free-for-all when people came through. So it would be like, okay, this person's working on a project at this time, I'm working on a project at this time, this person's working at a project at this time. And then we would have periods where we would open it up for visitors or people that weren't normally, you know, weren't at that point in the fam, as we used to call it, kind of open houses and things like that where people could just come through and showcase what they do. And then that turned into me thinking more broadly and thinking like, why don't I invite like even younger kids through that don't even know how to use the equipment yet? Maybe we can train them. Maybe we can kind of implement them into the fold. Because I had friends that were school teachers that would be like, yo, my students are really interested in hip hop and I would love to have you come talk to them. And I would try to say like, all right, well, instead of me coming and talking to them, I can show them better than I can tell them. Well, I felt like when I was their age and I had speakers that came through, it engaged me for like that little bit of time, but then it left. And I think hip hop is something that's more experiential. It's not just something that you could just take on as a lecture. A friend of mine, Lonnie Norwood, he was the lead music teacher at Little Black Pearl, which is on 47th and Kenwood. It's a charter school that's for the arts. Their mission is pretty much to teach the business of art. It's kind of set up college preparatory style. Students get to choose a major, whether it's song, dance. They even have a glass blowing program. It's one of the only glass blowing programs in the nation for youth. So he's like, come through, give a talk. I say, I'll do you one better. I'm getting my master's right now and I've written a curriculum and I'd like to just try out the curriculum on your students. Rather than me give a lecture, I'll give 5 or 6 lectures and we'll turn this into something. And then he said, well, I'd like to look at the curriculum. I want to kind of build on it with you. We'll bring the principal in, a couple other people. We've been trying to get a community grant. You know, it was like stuff that I wasn't even used to doing, but I got more than I bargained for, but in a good way. I was introduced to the world of grant writing and getting a 501c3. So Little Black Pearl was my fiscal sponsor initially with the Braniac Project, so I could take donations, build out the studio, do different things. And they had a built-in amount of kids who were interested in like creating hip hop music. So it was very easy for me to say, I got a studio, come through. Because I would be there with them during the school day, and then I said, well, during this period of time, I'm gonna be there and you guys can come work. That led into just us going from like maybe having 5 to 10 kids coming through the studio to having like 75 kids regularly coming through the studio. And I think word just got around that that's what we were doing. And so the official mission is that we're trying to show the viability of recording arts careers. You know, and that's pretty broad, but the idea is we're looking at the cultural potential of hip hop. I believe firmly that you cannot become a critical consumer of media without knowing how to create it yourself. And then once you can like rewire that and then examine that process, then you'll become better at it. It's almost like having physical education class back in the day when you're in elementary school. Like, you might not ever become a football player, but having actually been on the field and trying it out, you have some idea when you're watching TV what skill it takes to do that. Or you may never play in the NBA, but you probably played basketball at gym time, and that taught you what the rules of the game, how to be in a team structure, life skills that apply well beyond what that is. And so I think hip hop, music creation in general, does that. And I think music creation in this generation is much different than it was in the 70s and the 80s. It's been dematerialized, so everything kind of runs through the technology. Like, if you're in a studio now and Wi-Fi goes out, you would think we were in 92 and it was a riot, in LA or something, like Wi-Fi, having access to email, being able to utilize computers are essential to everything, to the show, the recording, everything is pretty wired in at this point. Me seeing that, I just really wanted to create a venue for youth to be able to kind of explore that process earlier on. It's something I wish was available for me. So I really just tried to recreate something that I thought I wanted to see for myself when I was at that age. Because at their age, I was just going to my cousin's house and watching his friends smoke marijuana. You know what I mean? And that used to get me in trouble. I would learn the tricks of the trade, but I would come home smelling illegitimate. My family wasn't all about letting me do that. I think if it wasn't my cousin, I would have gotten a lot more trouble.